I don't think so. No, we're live. You're gonna get to see me. That's it.
Oh, nice. I guess that's okay.
I'll, yeah, you can always watch it on YouTube, kind of simultaneously. Just mute it so the audio doesn't
No,
come through.
it's
But
okay. I don't want to see what I look like. I already see myself once. It's enough.
beautiful human. All right, we got a couple comments already. So I'm here today with I'm assuming it's Sean because I only
Yes,
know you as
Sean.
Dead Swan.
Yeah, Sean Carey is my name.
Sean Carey and at BlockJoy. And the reason that we're talking, Sean, is that BlockJoy is, as far as I know, the largest runner of validators as a service on Helium. And we've gotten this HIP 70 news recently that pretty obviously affects validators, myself included. I run half a validator on the BlockJoy service. So I thought we'd get you on and talk about what BlockJoy is doing, kind of what your guys' reaction is to HIP 70 and what is coming next. So that's kind of
Yeah.
the start of it. Let's start though. How did you get into BlockJoy? What was your entry point?
Yeah, so entry points was actually pretty easy. Is a little known thing about me is I co-founded Helium back in 2013. We were we were building like commercial IoT type systems. It was the word IoT didn't even exist back when we first started doing it,
Right.
and I spent a couple years working on Helium. Went off, started doing other things, and a bunch of years went by, and different jobs. I owned a nightclub for a while, just kind of chilled and did worked at IBM, and then I don't know, Chris Bruce, I've worked with for years, and he was also involved with Helium early. He reached out and he said, "Hey, let's build a platform for running validators on Helium," and I was not really into the crypto world as much as I have 25 years of system engineering experience.
Okay.
And so I was just kind of like, well, what's a validator? I probably was the first thing I said to myself, and then we kind of looked at what Helium was building and just started working on a system, and we found out like really early on that running these validators, the story became a lot different. Is like they ran in Docker containers, and we figured out really quick that running these things in Docker was kind of subpar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so then we broke. We had this thing called StakeJoy that we started. It was just a little LLC, and our primary goal was Helium. And all of a sudden, we built a bunch of neat things and a bunch of orchestration tools, and they weren't dedicated to any type of configuration management tools. Everything was, we just rolled it all custom and wrote our own daemons and built all kinds of interesting tooling. And we said, hey, we have something here. Like we should turn it into a business. And we took a little bit of investment money. I think I don't remember, a couple $1 million or something. And we started and we renamed the company to BlockJoy. And the idea behind BlockJoy is we figured out really quickly, we got so many validators so fast. One of the concerns that we had was the fact that we were running so many validators, and
Yep.
we changed the focus of our tools on the idea that you can run a validator with us, or you can use our software and deploy your validator anywhere you want. And in parallel to running StakeJoy and being this huge validator of Helium and going through ups and downs, not being perfect, doing great, we learned a ton, and we just started applying this to software. And we've had a parallel team with about we're almost 10 engineers now, and we've just been developing BlockJoy in parallel, quietly, and working to roll out a beta of the BlockJoy platform, which is going to support more than Helium, a bunch of blockchains right out of the gate. And the idea is we don't want to just support validation, but we want to support validation. We want to support RPC nodes. We want to support different ETL mechanisms, and anything else that's new, like that blockchains create, like when HIP 70 is like, what's an oracle? That's
Yep.
my next thing, right? Is like, so we start thinking about how are we going to deploy oracles, and or how are we going to deploy these applications that need to live beside blockchains, and that's really what we're all about at BlockJoy. Hope that wasn't too long-winded.
No, no. I mean, I think it's one thing is I always get on these interviews and I'm like, God, I'm just out of my depth. I don't know what these guys are talking about. It's every time, and it's awesome because there's such a depth of knowledge required to interact with any of these blockchains at a useful level, and it's always super cool to kind of see how folks who are experts in it are coming to it. So that part is super cool. The validator side. So let's see. I'm seeing in the comments that some folks didn't know that running validators in Dockers is how a lot of folks started off. And I remember when validators launched, it's like, oh yeah, well, you can run it in Docker, you can do this, and everybody was looking for the best way to do it. And then we all started hearing rumblings, and even I think before it launched, it's like, hey, there's this thing called BlockJoy, and they're going to run on bare metal, and they're building their blah 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 up. And so from the beginning, you guys had been really looking to see how to do the best possible job.
Yeah.
And it ended up, I don't know if we've said the number yet, but you guys run at least a quarter, a little bit more of all validators on Helium.
Yeah, so we run about a third of them, and you hit the nail on the head. Is we did start with bare metal first, and the reason why we thought like everybody else early on was like we'll just use this with Docker,
Yep.
and the problem, well, the first problem I had with that is there's really the only thing you can do with Docker, for managing the IPs of these things, you could do two things, right? You could do host only networking, have a bunch of containers, and then run the validators on different ports, or you could do some type of network bridge and then have private RFC 1918 IP addresses, and then have like some type of network address translation to those private Dockers. And I kind of despise that idea because these are blockchain applications. They're supposed to be wide open to the internet. They're supposed to be accessible to things, and they shouldn't be shoved down 8 firewalls or 8 layers of software defined networking.
Yep.
And so we ended up building StakeJoy on FreeBSD of all operating systems, not even Linux. And we used FreeBSD jails because we could actually do direct network interface based to a FreeBSD jail. So we could run a validator in a jail, keep it isolated, and essentially maintain all of those jails and keep it on a flat, non-software defined network. And we went with that out of the box, and I've been working on Linux for 25 years. So, the BSD joist came out of like a necessity early on because it was like, how can we quickly do this stuff? Can we, I don't know, what chroot is,
Nope.
but do we go in and do we chroot this stuff in Linux? Do we, there was a bunch of options to do it, and we ended up just writing. I wrote this thing and that could tear down and build up FreeBSD jails, and it essentially just became a product. And then we created a couple of algorithms around it, and Chris, my co-founder, he did a ton of the API and the UI work, and also helped me working down in the actual jail and container land. But that's kind of like my world is 20 some odd years doing system engineering. I've never been happier in my life doing this stuff because it's like literally we're doing it's like a culmination of like my life's work, and it's pretty exciting.
That is super exciting. Yeah, that's really cool. And I remember early on, I haven't paid attention to the validator in a while. I see that every month it spits out some other. I think every month me and the guy who split it out, but I haven't paid attention to it. Other than that, it seems to be working all the time. I don't think I've seen it down yet. And I remember early on there was some advantage, like everyone was talking about how you guys were going to be the fastest and doing the most validations and being the best. But it seems now that validation in general has settled down, not to not be competitive, but that everyone seems like they're at least on the same playing field. Am I understanding that right, or am I missing it?
So for the most part, one of the advantages is being in the know, right? So that's one advantage. And there have been times where we haven't been perfect. There have been times where we've been outpaced by people.
Yeah.
And that really comes with the industry, right? It's like, and so for example, and this kind of even leads into the idea of HIP 70. If you think about, when you're building these blockchains and validation platforms, there's a bug in the validator code. If you don't have like 50,000 blocks essentially inside of the validator, 50,000 blocks worth of data, the validator has trouble computing block time or how soon a block's going to come out. And the coordination of that information tends to get skewed, and it creates what are called BBA penalties, right? And so there are times where, and I went down the rabbit hole in this problem for like 2 months, a month and a half, and like switch systems, switch hardware, moved networks, moved between data centers, just trying to figure out why am I losing BBAs on these things, right? And this goes, for anybody, almost everybody on the network was having a similar problem. And the idea is like, why, you don't know off the top of your head that the system wants 50,000 blocks calculated. And I think a couple people out there, Telnet, he's in the validator ops channel.
Yep.
I was in there one day. I'm like, this is driving me crazy. Like, and G Telnet, who hopefully we're going to be at Helium House in next month,
Yep.
in this month actually.
Yep.
And first thing I want to do is have beers with that guy because he was the one that was like, oh yeah, you don't know about the 50,000 block thing. It was like kind of like the three seashells thing in the movie Demolition Man. And it was basically from there we were able to like go, oh, okay, like this is that problem. And also on top of that, in the last month, the 114 and 113.7 release. Sorry, my dog. I have a Great Dane, by the way, so I apologize.
I can hear him. Yeah, I got one
Hold on.
back here somewhere.
Nice. And so yeah, there were some incredibly good changes. I believe Professor and Evan they put in some really great performance changes in the 113.7, 114.
Okay.
And it's really put everybody on the same playing level if you have 50,000 blocks worth of data, or say 25 to 50,000 blocks worth of data.
And how much
Everybody
time
should
is
be
that?
running.
It's a block is a minute, so that's
So if a block's a minute, and there's however what's that 30? How many minutes are in a day? I don't even know. I'm old.
okay. But it's not off the top of your head yet.
Yeah,
It's a couple
block a
days,
minute.
couple weeks, something like that.
Yeah. Well, 50. You're talking about 50,000 blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be let's see,
Enhanced.
24 times 60.
And I'm
All right,
seeing
so
why you do. Go ahead.
1440 in a day. So yeah, 50,000 divided by 1440. So yeah, you got about 35 days worth of data.
Okay.
And so what ends up happening is, say like something goes wrong, right, and you blow away your blockchain data directory, and then you have to apply a snapshot to the validator. You have a much higher likelihood of that validator spitting out errors because it doesn't have that block data to understand how quickly the blocks are coming out. And this was something, like I said, I didn't discover this problem, but this problem plagued me and other people. And such a wonderful community was curated over the last year and a couple months. That it's just such a great level of camaraderie, between people and sharing this information. And that was probably the biggest driver for penalties in the last several months. And it was a real killer. But I mean, there have been so many enhancements now to the validators that they actually run pretty damn good. And it's good. So it's good to see that.
You love it. Yeah, I mean the validators especially. I think all of the kind of niche channels or niche channels in the Discord server are really helpful and positive. Some of the more general ones, you just get more people who are less positive all the time. But it's been really cool to see some of the whether it's DOI packet forward or validators really help each other. You're getting some action on this Demolition Man reference. I missed it. What's the three seashells thing?
The three seashells. You don't know how the three seashells work?
No.
So the three seashells is a really famous line. Demolition Man was a movie with Wesley Snipes and Sylvester Stallone, and Stallone was like this like badass cop that like blew up a building and like killed a bunch of people, and they cryogenically froze him for like 100 years as his prison sentence. And he woke up in the future, and I'm really summarizing this poorly, but he woke up in the future and he goes to the bathroom and he walks out of the bathroom and he's like, so these three, he's like, I was looking for toilet paper, but all I could find were these three seashells. And somebody laughs at them and he's like, he doesn't know about the three seashells. So that's where the reference comes from. But you have to see it. It's
okay.
Much fun here.
Noted. Well, thanks. Okay, so that, I mean, more or less brings us up to today. You guys are still running a third of all validators. The HIP 70 news comes out. You guys in the background have been working on being able to run validators for other chains. So it's not devastating to your business, but it's certainly a big change. And I just saw in the announcements on the Helium thing that there's some back and forth on how, like on the unstaking period, because I think originally there was like this 2-week unstake and now it's going to go back to a 5-month unstake. And how are you guys thinking about that? Like, what do you think is going to happen? What are your kind of thoughts in general on?
Yeah. So it's interesting. First off, people would be like, you would think I'd be like, oh my God. But one thing one thing that we've been doing is we've been preparing our business to actually, to scale to other blockchains and other types of applications for months. And we've been thinking about it. We incorporated BlockJoy last October 1st, actually. Okay. And so we've been slowly moving towards a model for almost a year where BlockJoy is, for us, a bigger thing. Like we don't want to be a validator as a service. what we're trying to do is, when we're thinking about is like, if Amazon were to build a system to support 100 different blockchains, how do we think somebody like Amazon would roll it out, but have it be in a really performance effective way? And that's really our primary concern in the world. That being said, we're going to lose 1,100 and some odd validators. I can't remember how many. At the same time, new things are going to come out of Helium. Helium's going to have oracles. Oracle's going to have a much larger buy-in, but there's still, there'll still be community support from VEHNT. But I think, and I guess in the long-winded sense of this, I understand why this change is happening. Is when you build something like a blockchain, especially a layer one blockchain, this thing's been going for what, a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. Look at Ethereum as a perfect example. How long has Ethereum been developing and beta testing just the actual proof of stake part of the blockchain that they're releasing? This stuff takes an enormous amount of work and an enormous amount of performance tuning, and the level of understanding to do it is just insane. And so what I think Helium's trying to do as a business is that they're, or not a business, but as a foundation, is they're trying to leverage existing high transaction type systems and then move to a model with these oracles that allow somewhat of a more centralized approach. I guess you could even just say a centralized approach early on, but then expand that to decentralize it with these, staked oracles or whatever they're going to call them, where it costs, it's 250 million mobile tokens to actually get an oracle. And so it becomes a different kind of thing, because you're putting a massive amount of token and support into a larger object that might be able to more efficiently be able to process information off the blockchain, or process information, like proof of coverage receipts. Right. And that became a huge problem with validators. And I don't know if you've ever seen, like, if you go in the chats and it's like, oh, we have to turn down POC, right? And we can only do 200 POCs right now. And really,
it's
what
like
that
it's
means,
a dial on a radio. It's like, I'm just going to tweet this thing.
Yeah, it's a variable on the blockchain. And the reason why this stuff has to be turned up and turned down, because it's like the blockchain's exploding, because everyone's trying to negotiate around and process this information, and then actually get back to it in a reasonable amount of time. There's only so many proof of coverage receipts that can be processed at any given time. Then you have the factor of where they're changing in HIP 70, where proof of coverage is initiated by the validator, and it goes down to the hotspot, and I guess that has become error prone. And so proof of coverage is going to actually initiate at the hotspot and go up to the oracle, and that may end up becoming a much less error prone type of concept to do this. And so is it scary? It's sad to see a part of the community break. And basically, but I do have full faith in Helium. Being with this company, I did nothing to create the blockchain, but being early in this company since day one, and then building something that was based in this company, I'm still very optimistic for the future. To the point where, like, I'm fully invested in where they're going in the future with mobile, right? And I'm still very personally bullish on the mobile, and to the point where I'm running a bunch of mobile systems like other people out there.
Interesting. So, I mean, it's always there's a fair amount of technical details in what you've been saying, and I gotta say I'm keeping up with most of it, but not all of it. But I think one of the really big pieces here is, look, you've been with this thing since literally the beginning. You're sticking with it, and when I see folks in kind of not the general public, because the general public doesn't know about Helium, but the general Helium public, and they're like, oh my God, every time they get something almost fixed, they break something else. Is that I really think of that as a very different story. Is every time they find a new problem, they figure out a fix for it, and they don't just sit and let the problem explode. They try and fix it before it happens. But the whole thing is so new. As you said, you weren't into crypto or blockchain before you got to this, and then you did, and you're like, oh, I'll figure this out because it will be susceptible to my skill sets. Right? So
I'll address the first thing is, like, every time something was changed, something broke, right? Yeah. When you look at it from that perspective, right, it's like, one of the issues is you have like a release. It's like, oh, we went from 1.13 to 1.14 or 1.11 to 1.12. Some of these are massive changes where, like, one of the releases where where the blockchain was and the gossip and the peering was kind of leaving the hotspots and then the gRPC was opening to the validators. These are massive things, right? And what ends up happening is when you make these changes, it might introduce other problems, things in memory, things in CPU. So there are lots of memory problems.
Yep.
And so I think the one maybe fault in all of it is not only Helium, but us as a community, we didn't build a big enough, strong enough test net to actually be able to validate a lot of this stuff. And what I would say in the future when you do these things is companies or foundations that build these things, if they build incentivized test nets, even if you don't get full token for these things, you tend to get more users and more tests and more validation around what you're trying to do. And so I feel like it's a kind of a two-prong approach. You can't really, like, you could take a piece of code and deploy it on the little Helium test net. It's tiny, right? And you go, okay, it works, it functions, and then all of a sudden you add that to like the 3,600 validators and the 980,000 hotspots, and it's literally like it's like apples and steak. It's like it's just two completely different things. And that's the one thing I learned is when we were running Helium, the Helium validators in testnet, I was like, oh, we're kicking ass. Look at this. I can run like 40 validators on one server. This is great. We're killing it.
Easy. Yeah.
And then you go from testnet to mainnet, and you're like, oh, okay, never mind. This is something completely different. And so yeah, it just becomes like a, the one, and it's not even really a criticism. I would say I'm criticizing myself, the community, and maybe even partly the foundation. Is we should have a stronger, more badass testnet to really hash these things out. And I think like Ethereum, they're leading by example on things like this, and maybe we look at that in the future and we figure those things out too.
Do you think that might be something you build as kind of testnet as a service for a bunch of different chains, or is that too crazy?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Like, there's already companies that do that, so there's no reason why you can't run a testnet validator or a mainnet validator. So when you launch like BlockDaemon, and you go on there and their UI, it's like, where do you want to be? Are you on testnet or mainnet? Costs the same, but at least you have the option to choose. But
Right.
there's what makes Helium a little more complicated, maybe more so than other application types, are the hotspots. It's like, so maybe there's actually a hotspot testnet that's all, and then there's also an Oracle / validator testnet, and these things actually become interwoven because conceptually, I guess it's more complicated to build a testnet for Helium, and so we'd have to do something like that.
Right. Huh. Okay. When you're seeing this move to Solana seems to have kind of lovers or haters. And then there's a few sensible people who kind of just assess it for whatever it is. What are your reactions to that? You thinking that's like, oh, this is a super good move, this is a bad move, it doesn't matter to me? Like, where are you coming on that?
So the first disclaimer about me is I'm not a blockchain purist. Okay. Everybody will tell you early on when we were at Helium, and back in 2014, there were people in the company that were like, we should turn this into a blockchain. And my response to that is just like, are you crazy? This stuff isn't going to exist in 5 years. Like I was not one of the blockchain purists. After Helium launched a blockchain, after I saw like success in other blockchains, I was sold on, and I'm sold on the idea of these distributed ledger systems but early on, yeah, this was not something that I thought would ever make it. And I went off into that spiel, and I totally forgot your question.
Sure.
Yeah, just hit me with it again.
That's okay. Yeah, we'll take our time, go back to it. So we're moving to Solana with this HIP 70 piece. Yep.
Yeah. So with Solana, and the reason why I wanted to, I guess, preface that with the idea is like, I'm not tied to anything, but one thing I do as a CTO and a technology person is I like to listen to everybody. And
yep.
One of the things I do hear is there's a lot of people out there that rumble about Solana because of maybe how central it is compared to other blockchains. Were there other potential blockchains that could have filled that gap better? But one of the things that I've learned in the last several weeks, and one of the reasons why people are moving towards Solana, not just because it has fast transactions, and maybe there are things where like there's super majority validators and it's not great, but maybe it can improve. But one of the things is liquidity. Moving into Solana makes it easier than most blockchains out of the box to get liquidity.
Yeah.
And so I see that, right? And I'm like, well, if Helium, moves over to become, a part of the Solana blockchain, the liquidity is easier. It's easier to probably work with something like Coinbase. It's probably easier to build other applications that do other things that might expand the ecosystem. And so then I look at it from a business point of view, and is that the easier access to liquidity and building other applications and moving between different blockchains or other types of applications? Do those benefits outweigh the benefits of using some type of other blockchain, like they have that open source? I'm going to draw a blank on it real quick. The open source blockchain toolkit written in Go.
I'm sure
You
someone
could.
will drop it in the chat. We'll
Yeah,
figure
yeah.
it out.
I'm totally drawing a blank. I was just talking about it like 10 minutes ago too.
Yeah.
And you can literally like build your own system. Build your validators, your transactions, everything on it. And it's pretty popular. But is the liquidity side of it harder? Like where the blockchain side of it is incredibly easy, but is the liquidity part of it and getting it into markets and trading is it much harder to do that? And that's really what it comes down to, because I guess it's really hard to list these things and get them onto exchanges. And
Sure.
the question really is like, is moving to Solana really making that easier to allow the network to expand in a better way and have more access to more markets? And on top of that, Solana has its challenges in performance or in outages, just like Helium does. And I'm sure no blockchain is bulletproof. It's software. It's humans make it. It just you can't master that stuff.
Yeah. Huh. When you yeah, man, I was walking around. I was talking about this with my wife last night. She's like, "Well, what's going to happen next, and what's going to happen to the price of HNT, and is HNT going to be worth anything, and what's this VEHNT?" And I think it's super curious because there's this really technical aspect to this where like I don't know how to explain that, but I think directionally this idea that anything the Helium team does is not going to be against the interests of HNT seems to be more or less correct. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I've thought about that too. And you look at like I have I printed out HIT 70 just for this call, and just looked over it and made sure I read it twice. And when you look at it, some of this stuff is kind of complicated. It's probably easy for an engineer to get, right.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the foundation is going to have to work on, and the board are going to have to work on, is a way to make this stuff digestible, and make it so people understand it. And I'll use an example, and I won't say the name of it since we're not talking about this company. But there's a company out there that named like their products like flowers and honeybees and friggin' like all these things. I can't and for me as an engineer, I look at it, I'm like, that's kind of goofy. And then then I ask somebody that was an engineer about it, well, the reason why they liked it is because it actually helps give that granularity to what something is. Like somebody knows what a bee is, somebody knows what a flower is.
Yep.
But but when you look at something like VEHNT and mobile HNT, and like what does VEHNT stand for? And I actually had to like go through and write it down, because I know what VEHNT did, but I had no idea what it was. And I think if you look at the user base, one of the reasons why BlockJoy is early successful is because we spent a lot of time with customers that weren't technical, and we walked them through every little command, every little thing you had to do, because you couldn't just go to a web page and stake something.
Yep.
And so I have the experience with the customers that are not technical. And if you look at it, there's a lot of data and financial people out there that are not technical, but they're very, very interested in economics.
Yeah.
And there have to be things that can mentally satisfy their understandings of how these things work. So I guess to answer, summarize that, the question is, it's really, I think if the foundation does a good job at streamlining how these things work, or having a good analysis of how like all these different currencies work and how they peg against HNT, I think it will be fine. I still have other questions and other things that I think about, but it's when it comes to like the HNT versus mobile versus IoT and how they're all going to work. But it really is stuff is always just a work in progress. And it's at the end of the day, what I really understand is I understand their pain. The pain of trying to grow something,
Yeah.
and the pain of hitting that wall, and then having to deal with like the POC transactions and the errors and the problem and the performance, and them saying, well, we can do this, and we can we can kind of think less about this area, and then we can continue to, build what we came here to build, and I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, yeah. I totally. Reading through HIP 70 is I haven't been able to read through it enough times to totally internalize it and understand it, and it's. I don't know. In one sense, it's cool because it means there's so much still to learn, and as long as you're learning, you're live. In the other sense, it's sometimes frustrating because you think, oh, like what is going on here? And there's a really interesting intersection with blockchain and these kind of blockchain and meat space projects where you have to have a technology expertise. You have to have a specific technology expertise with blockchain applications or blockchains in general, and then you have to have this economist expertise to kind of put it all together and make sure the incentives are aligned correctly. And that's a pretty difficult thing to get right.
It is, and I guess it will still be seen, right? And that's the one thing we all don't know is do the economics match? Are they going to match? And was it the right decision? And I think the only thing that can really answer that is to push forward through it and understand it. I'm not an economics person at all, so I look at it from a technological perspective, and I can weigh in on the technological side, and I can understand why the Oracle will be centralized to start and then become something that is decentralized over time, and where they're mentally going with it, and from seeing what validators do. But when it comes to the economics of things, I can like barely balance my checkbook properly when it comes to stuff like that. So not that anyone writes in a checkbook anymore. I shouldn't say that. I'm showing my age, but
many mysteries. No, I'm the same way. Do you have? Let's see. Do you break it down so that you have like personal validators that you run?
So we have personal validators. We have Chris and I both do, and we also have customer validators. I don't run many validators, and my big thing now is try not to plug mobile too hard because it's about validators, but my big thing now is mobile. So I'm on the personal side away from BlockJoy. I have some really great guys at a company in New York City that are basically putting up outdoor mobile systems for me and deploying these things, because one of the things I'm doing is I'm not taking like 5G mobile systems and plugging them in and throwing them under my bed and just earning tokens. Nope. I want the mobile systems that I own to actually continue to do something for the network after the Genesis period. And so our average height for one of these 5G or the LTE buy cells, we're pushing like 140 to 170 feet above ground. In some buildings where we cover every angle of a building, that, and it could definitely cover some vast distance, in a city area. Well, vast for these type of frequency. Yeah. And but I'm a big believer if people do this and they take these steps and push these things forward. And validators were great, at the time, but I like I said, I can just see why, based on what validators do. I think validators would be incredible and high performance, but it's the time that has to be sacrificed to get that done, and the time that has to be sacrificed doing that instead of building and progressing in other places. And that's really what the main measurement is. I personally believe for Helium. No one's told me that there, but that's okay. How I feel.
Yeah, no. So I got a couple questions. Can I ask you what you plan to do with the HNT when these validators go away, or is that something you're like, nope, not answering that?
I think I can answer it. We've to this day we've never sold a single HNT. So, and it's not like we don't have it's not like we're running 600 validators, right?
Right.
But I can tell you from our perspective is like we've never ever. The only time I spend HNT is if I have to transfer mobile credits, and that's like it's like 0.05. And but other than that, we've never spent a single HNT since the day we started StakeJoy.
Wish I could say the same, but I used it to pay my mortgage for a couple months.
That's cool. Hey, that's awesome.
It was amazing because I look back at it now. It's the last quarter of 2020, paid the mortgage with it, and I look at it now like maybe I shouldn't have done that, but and then all these things end up working out. So that's the HNT question, and I think that answers or hopefully helps people make their own decision with it if they're doing their validator stuff and what they're going to do with it. And then the second piece is how are you thinking about putting these mobile radios up high? How are they going to compete with the major telcos out there? Because it seems like from what I've kind of learned that the best place for these is going to be like indoors where the telcos can't reach. But it sounds like you're going head to head with them.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I don't. I'm not much of an expert when it comes to what telcos are doing.
Okay,
I'm just doing what I think might be good.
got it.
And so getting them up high, getting them on good angles. You know, when you upload these things and you have an azimuth, and we're trying to get like good angles to where like it's like penetrating streets or things like that.
Yep.
And a lot of them is it's also building a footprint of these things, and that's what we're doing. Is we're in buildings in like New York and New Jersey where we're building a hell of a footprint just on a single building where like these could be like 20-story buildings that with massive roofs on them, and where we have 4 different Freedom Fi gateways on that roof and pointing in different directions, different angles into areas.
Sure.
And I think and for us it's really about what is going to make mobile succeed, right? And that is actually us as a community is building the coverage to do that and building the proper coverage. And you can have the indoors, and the indoors are going to work good, but you have to think about what the indoors are. Who are they going to cover, right? Is it in a big apartment building? Is there 2 of them on every floor of an apartment building? Because those are other things you could get into. Is like if you know somebody that runs a Wi-Fi network in an apartment building, a lot of that stuff is outsourced. You could put a 5G indoor next to every single Wi-Fi hotspot on every floor of an apartment. Then all of a sudden you start to get that roaming. But also, the reward structure for like actually capturing packets on those on the indoor systems, will they be rewarded less? How do you get those rewards? How do people collect those rewards? That becomes an interesting thing. But as for competing with telcos, I think the best plan in the world is going to be complementary to telcos and maybe compete at some level. I mean, and you see that a lot already, right? It's like you see T-Mobile in last week, T-Mobile and SpaceX or whatever they call it, the Wi-Fi thing from Elon Musk. They just put a deal together where like you can get T-Mobile from space, low Earth orbit. They're competing companies, but you can work together on certain things to drive the best path forward. And I think that will make it all the more viable.
Yeah. Let's shift a little bit back to the what you guys are building for the future with this validator stuff as you're transitioning from Helium Validators because they're going away. Mm-hmm. And what are you looking at as maybe kind of the thing you're most excited about as far as maybe the next chain or maybe the next specific project?
Yeah. So one of the things that we're doing is, without going too much into the way our technology works, is we've made it really easy to onboard any chain. And for me, my thinking, and I'm sure Chris, my co-founder, same thing, is we want to come out of the gate with BlockJoy supporting more validators and more blockchains and nodes than any other company out there right off the bat. And we want to do it in a way where those companies aren't competitors, but we've always said we would love for if we build it and it works well, we would love for those people to be customers. Like we don't want to be a VAS. We want to support VAS. We want to support other companies. And
VAS is validator as a service.
Exactly, yeah. And the other thing is there are so many different other types of nodes and applications that we can potentially support. We're not just limited to that. And on top of that, there may be places in the world where we have a very large system, and there may be other types of companies out there that need our assistance or want our assistance helping them run their larger applications. And so we've definitely live in that world too. And on top of that, we are also building a bunch of data tools that I won't talk too much about, but there's a tool we've been working on. We told some people about some people about, including you actually, called Broadcast. And it was built specifically for Helium, and it runs internally. That's how we collect data about stuff that's happening on the blockchain. And now we're looking at Broadcast and making it more generic for all the blockchains we're going to support. And what Broadcast can do is it can allow you to build an index of things that you want to know that a blockchain is doing with regards to wallets. So there's some like dude with 500 million tokens, and you want to see every transaction he makes or she makes. You can build an index of that, or you can have it send you a text message, things like that. And Broadcast is just an interesting tool that allows us to do that. And now we're just working on the concepts for making those methods generic.
That's cool. It's because we're gathering new sets of information, and so there's always going to be value to be captured in those new
Yep.
sets of information. Understanding it, it seems like strategically like a super good move. I'm
Yeah,
seeing a
and
couple.
that's the thing. And like I was saying earlier about the blockchains, I guess if I were to be bullish on a blockchain, definitely Ethereum. Ethereum is a huge priority. We believe that with the kind of the direction they're going in with the validators and the proof of stake and also other potential items in the future, that's definitely one of the first ones on the list. And we'll also support Solana, and that right out of the gate. And you'll people will be able to see this probably in the next. We're aiming at beta in a matter of weeks at this point. Now we're just we switched some things on our software and just kind of pushing it all together.
Right on. Super exciting to see. Let's see. I'm seeing in the chat, Gary's asking, are you going to be at Helium House?
Absolutely. So if anybody wants to hang out, get drinks, I'm buying as long as it's not more than 200 people. No. But yeah, absolutely. I'll be there. I'll be at Helium House this month. I can't remember what day it's at, but
I think it's the 20th. And then
nice.
what are you still, let's see, it sounds like the dumbest question. Are you still part of Helium? Are you still the founder or one of the founders? Did you get out of it? Are you part of Nova? Like what's your connection?
I'm not a direct employee of any of it anymore. Okay. I founded Helium, which the original name of the company was Skynet Phase One Incorporated.
Awesome.
You guys can still see that somewhere. But yeah, Amir and I and Sean founded that company in 2013, right around that area, and basically, yeah, and it was a completely different product with a similar vision, and it really was about putting hotspots in places for people to send small amounts of information, and but the incentive structure wasn't there, and that's the brilliant part of the blockchain is like. One of the biggest issues we had when we were working on this was like, hey, how are we going to incentivize people? Oh, let's pay for their internet. We'll just give them $50 a month towards their internet, and they'll stick one of these in the window. And so once the blockchain came and people got used to that idea and it was built, it actually created what I think was an amazing purpose for Helium. But also, I firmly believe that Helium is one of the first blockchains out there that has a true purpose outside of people just having a token with a value on it. And it's basically convinced me of that's how I look at blockchains from this day on. I don't give a shit about the price of it. What I care about is what the purpose of the blockchain is and what the blockchain is going to do. Because we all know price is going to fluctuate. Bitcoin was $60,000 a few months ago. Now it's like a third of that. And for me, it's all going to be about what is purpose-driven, what it does, and what it really does for society and how it could potentially help people. And I think that's where the value lies, personally.
Totally. I'm staking at least a fair amount of my attention on this whole blockchain and meat space interaction coming up. I think that's where it is, which is the same. I think the same thing you're saying, the purpose of it. Let's see. I'm seeing Kevin in the chat's asking, is there a place people can go to learn more about broadcast, or is that still kind of under wraps?
Yeah, just email me, Sean@blockjoy.com, SEAN, and we're still so early. We don't even have biz dev people, but we're gonna initially have that, but we're gonna be looking for early community adopters, that are interested in these types of things, and we'll give them beta access. Broadcast is actually pretty far along on the Helium side. We use it every day, but we kind of paused it just to shift resources around to work on. The BlockJoy. We have like this hypervisor, layer 2 hypervisor that we created, and so that's really our main focus right now. And then once that launches, we're going to put a lot of effort into the broadcast tools. But we could have a beta on it soon.
All right. Exciting
Thank
stuff.
you,
Yeah. However I can help out with that, let me know.
Sure.
Do you
write rough?
So like here's the $1 million question, or one of many $1 million questions, is are you expecting Helium to announce a tier 1 telco partnership at Helium House? That's one of the questions from the chat. And I think everybody's asking everyone else, like, hey, what do you think's going to happen?
Man, I don't want to like do bad luck things like say yes and then have it not happen. I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be some type of interesting announcement that they're holding, and it's probably going to be something of interest because there's a lot of questions about like support for E911, support for a lot of the mobile services and the things that people still need that they don't necessarily want, right? It's like no one wants a phone number anymore, but they kind of have to have a phone number. I don't want a phone number. I don't want anyone calling me. but you still kind of have to have them to live in this world.
Yep.
And I think personally, I don't know if it's going to be a tier one. I would love for it to be a tier one mobile company, but I'm assuming that something neat will launch at Helium House that's going to help enable and push forward the mobile and 5G ideas, and it and help stabilize the actual concept as a viable thing. And
Yeah.
that's my hope. What it is, I don't know, but I think it will be good.
Yeah, I'm always excited. I mean, it's always good just to see everybody again and kind of hang out and see what's going on. Looks like AP says he's going to track you down and find you at the bar. So watch out for that little
Absolutely.
fella.
Yeah, absolutely. Please, like my phone number is out in the ether, so you guys can always just text me or just email, Sean at blockjoy.com.
Yeah, just don't
And
call me. He doesn't
we
want to be
can,
called.
yeah, don't call me. Yeah, if you really want to, if you just, yeah, you can text my phone. The phone number's out there, but but yeah, just don't call it, please, for the love
That's
of God.
funny. I've seen something from Joe Networkbix. Give us the pros and cons for developing a blockchain native to the project. In other words, what does Helium miss out on for not having their own L1?
So what do they miss out on for having their own? So I guess the one big thing is it was invented here. I guess is a con, if that's a con. The other con is maybe, oh, man, that's a good question, Joe. So I guess the other one is if something really out of the box has to happen, maybe it could be simpler in a layer one. But there's so many things now that are going into layer twos that are taken so seriously.
Yep.
I'm not sure from the Helium perspective if it truly matters. But I also may not be the most skilled person to answer that one, because
Sure.
I might not be thinking about a rational reason. But I think with anybody that's building a layer one thing that they're going to have to really think about, and Cosmos was the blockchain I was thinking of earlier.
Cosmos. Okay.
You're buying so many more complicated things by running a layer one, even though it might be philosophically better, it might be more open, it might be more distributed. But there's philosophy and then there's reality to a lot of things, right? And that's really what it comes down to. And I think so. Maybe philosophically, Helium's better off being a layer one, but realistically, Helium can advance better as a foundation and an organization, and actually help people not only earn more tokens, but have better data transfer, and a better user experience for what this thing was created for. Because if you look at actually, if you kind of look at the first page of HIP 70, the first thing it talks about is basically data. Like it's like data reliability. This is a thorn in our spine. And so if they can move to a layer two to create data reliability, but all the mystique and unicorn level shit that comes with being a layer one disappears, maybe it's okay. Like maybe it's okay to be a layer two. But I've never personally written a blockchain. But I do know the guys that architected and built this blockchain very well. Actually, one of them, I hired one of them at Helium, and he's a wonderful human being, and he's brilliant. But I just know this stuff is going to take it just running these layer ones. You just look at Ethereum. How many years did it take them
Yeah.
to not have massive bugs? And then the sad part is you go into like general, right? And like something's blown up and it's like, oh, Helium's broken again, and it's like, that feels awful. As a developer, if you haven't developed something that breaks, you see that stuff, you're like, man, my life sucks right now.
Yeah.
So if you have something that's working and moving forward and has some level of success and you can attach to it, I think the biggest risk window you have is if there's an overall problem with Solana. And there's a major problem with Solana, and maybe you could have avoided that by running your own layer one, but maybe like Helium spent a year trying to get the performance they needed from a layer one. So you have to weigh those two things and figure out which one is more important to you: is the prestige or the
Function.
the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Get that
So
sucker working. I mean, it's really interesting because I don't know anything about this. I'm like, well, it's got to be the better way to do it is to have your own layer one. And I think, yeah, but maybe it's pretty clearly not.
Well, I mean, if you look at like all the people, the historical distributed systems experts of the world, Cap Theorem, Eric Brewer, the guy from Microsoft Research, who I'm dropping, I can't remember his name now, Lamport or somebody. But you look at all these people, and this stuff is so hard to do, and like it takes companies like it's like a lot of, and actually a lot of the guys at Helium that I worked with in the past, we worked together at another company that made a distributed database, and so like the knowledge is there for those things. It's like doing this stuff is so hard, and it's just time and effort, and then you really have to wait. And I commend Amir, for making the decision, because it really it's a tough decision, because I'm sure he didn't want to just basically be like, okay, let's move to Solana, it's easier. But I think really the decision he's making, and he's helping drive into this vote, or whoever, I don't even know who wrote the hip, to be honest, but whoever is driving driving this, they feel like they're going to inherently make Helium better because of it, and
Sure.
and so that's a big thing, and sometimes you have to eat crow and move to something different for the longevity and the ability to move faster.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say
My head's
probably a good time to call out. Well, go ahead.
I thought my head's frozen on the screen, so I don't know sorry if my head's frozen to you guys.
Looks like it's a little frozen to me, but I'm sure it'll catch back up.
Cool.
It's probably a decent place to call out. I mean, Amir has really shown pretty rad leadership at certain key points in this, whether it was, like at whatever part you want to pick, where he's doing what appears to be kind of the hard right thing. Is the easy thing now would be like, oh, we'll just do the same thing we've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really hard decision, because if decisions were easy like this, because I'm sure there's still some level of unsurety around it, right?
Yep.
But he's truly working to make the hard decision to do what he thinks is best for for the foundation and for Nova.
Yeah.
And so in making and so having to like switch it up on the fly like this, and kind of change the direction of your business, it's a huge decision, and I got to commend him for it, because I think it's a scary, complicated decision, but he's doing in his heart what I believe he thinks is the best decision, and I think I think he totally cares about the decision, and that's really what matters the most.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's super cool to see. Well, it's super good to have you on. I see your videos dropped out. We'll see if we can pull it
Yeah,
back
I died. I'm sorry. I don't know what
okay.
happened.
I think the really cool takeaway I got from this, Sean, is that, look, you're one of the kind of bigger players in this space as far as running a bunch of validators and so being invested by it. And rather than being devastated by a change in the system, you're super excited about where it's going. And so for me, just hearing that is enough to say, like, okay, cool. This Helium thing, it's probably going to go. Like, nothing's certain. Nobody knows, if the thing's going to be perfect in the long run. But you look at any great business, and there are these, giant kind of inflection points or giant challenge points, and this is probably one of them. But it's also really a really good indicator to see folks like you still psyched on it and building for it, and kind of seeing where you can employ your talents and abilities next within the system, which is super, super cool. So thanks. Tom.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we absolutely see a future in lots of places, and still with Helium, by the way, too. With the with the acquisition of Freedom Fi,
Yep.
there's all kinds of software in that world. With running the oracles, I mean, these things could be behemoths, and we might need a lot of them. And the idea of having 200 billion mobile tokens, and I don't know how many IoT tokens, and the oracles needing to process these and handle all these different POCs. There could be a lot of things out there in the future that we all need to work from, and it's good to keep an optimistic side of it. A lot of us, we've been fighting fires. Everybody that's been in the Validator Arms channel has just been firefight after firefight for the last year.
Yep.
And that's when one of the things you look at, and it's kind of like, oh, it's sad to see it go, but at the same time, is I do see a future where the talent and the amazing people in these groups that have been working on these things can continue to move forward on other things, even in the Helium ecosystem, but also got a ton of amazing experience, just based on this last year of our lives, and really for me, that's what matters the most.
Yeah. Now you guys just lived through a 1-year sprint. Good job.
Yeah, so like a 1 year fire alarm.
Yep. Let's see. I'm seeing in the chat people are asking about the value of HNT. I think Gary, like, neither of us are economists, and I think I've guessed on it before. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, Sean. I don't think I have a
I
good
mean,
number. So
yeah, honestly, I said earlier, I don't have a huge opinion on the value of HNT.
yeah,
I think and what was the person's name that asked the question?
Gary.
Yeah, so Gary, the one thing that I would say is, you know, I look at it like if we all do everything we possibly can to make sure helium is as good as it can possibly be. Economically, the viability is there. We know what it does. If you look at like when you look at the value of something like Dogecoin or did I say that right? Dogecoin, I don't know. And then you
Uh-huh.
look at helium, it's like you're like, holy shit, there's actually something legitimate here.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
doing
really about
something.
all of us, yeah, coming together and supporting it in a way that it's going to create value. And the more value that we create, in this infrastructure, in these blockchains, and in the community, it's just going to inherently create more value, for the foundation and for HNT.
Good.
And other than that, that's what I think is more important than an actual number.
No, I'm on board with that. Uh, People always want a number, so I get it. And then I
I
saw a
suck at
couple,
numbers.
yeah, a couple comments about mobile being USA focused. Like it is. I think it's not the nicest way to say it, but it's like if you want mobile in your country, you're gonna have to lobby your country to make it so that you can run your own 5G or CBRS network or whatever it is there. Like that's
Mhm.
it sucks. I wish I could wave a magic wand and make it open to everyone in the world, but it's not. And so I think we're going to see some pretty cool stuff coming from some service providers. And I don't know if you guys will do this or not, but just connecting people who are overseas with mobile installers here. We're already seeing a couple folks buying units and then who are in, wherever, Europe, and saying, hey, place this in the US, and they're hiring someone to do it. So
Yeah, I
this
think
is,
there's going to be a huge amount of growth in that area, Nick. And so, like, there's going to be people out there that can selectively say, I want to deploy this, and there are going to be people out there that are visible and available for deployments, and there might be some matchmaking system for that. That's a great thing. Also, if you're in a country that doesn't have the 5G and the mobile stuff, start thinking about other things that can work off these type of blockchains. Think about a content delivery network. How do you create a sub DAO of a content delivery network on Helium? That would be incredible. I wrote a CDN back in like 2006, 2007. It was a music download service at colleges, and I think about that now. I'm like, anybody can run a content delivery system. You can get a server, run it at Hetz, and you run it here. And if there was good software built around that, there could be like a viable content delivery system as a sub DAO of HNT. I want to see something like that. So maybe if Europe misses out on mobile, who cares? Like, come up with let's build a content delivery network. Let's build something with voice over IP. I don't know. There's a lot
yeah.
of things out there that we can do, and I believe that's like the magic that Helium's trying to create. Is it's not limited to one thing anymore.
Yeah. Do you have any bets on what they're going to do after they're finished with mobile? Is it going to go to Wi-Fi or VPN or CDN or unknown?
I would do CDN. I don't know what they're going to do, but like for me, I'm itching to make a blockchain CDN.
Why is that
I
so enticing?
So one of the things that I did years ago, I built all the system infrastructure for Giphy. You know, that thing that everyone uses in Slack, and Giphy/Giphy.
Yeah.
And I wrote all of the caching code for that.
Okay.
And I did it was something like, it was like 28 or 30 some odd terabits a second of GIFs just flying through the internet. And it was such a complicated problem to the point where, like, I had to write test code for CDN code, which was like unheard of, and there were like hundreds of rules around the way that GIFs were cached, and I was literally just like, man, this would be amazing. If somebody built like a distributed version of this, and it
Yeah.
maybe did somehow could magically do any cast, and it could be like a single IP CDN like all around the world, and it was a blockchain, and the blockchain doesn't have to serve the data.
Right.
What the blockchain needs to do, it just needs to validate it, like it's an actual that it's a CDN node,
Yep.
and it
Oh.
can literally be open source tooling that's customized to actually be the CDN, and then the blockchain is just there to actually to announce that it's not just some scam job.
Yeah.
And I think for me that's a huge thing, like mentally, and if there it's going to be a hard problem to solve,
Yep.
but
Those are the
I
best
think
problems to work on.
yeah, and if I was just not doing anything right now, that's one of the things that I would build I would try to figure out how to build a content delivery oracle on HNT and basically try to create my own subDAO. Let me know if you build one. I'll help you with the tokens on it. How's that sound?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's out of my expertise, but maybe someone watching this will reach out to you.
Yeah,
Which
sure.
would be super cool. I mean, that's the thing is like so far, almost everyone I've met in the whole Helium ecosystem has been super cool about helping each other out. So
Yeah, no, it's been a great thing, and it's been an exciting thing, and that's one thing we've always tried to do is like, just like G-Tal. I don't even know. I think his name's George G-Talnet. He's in the Validator Arms channel.
yeah,
If you ever watch him in action, like he's there, and he's not only there for himself, but he's working with people. This guy DPG is always in
he's
there.
a crusher. Yeah. No, I'm familiar with
Yep.
him. He's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm
so these
hoping
guys
I
are
get
all
to meet
great.
him at Helium House.
Yeah, we're definitely all going to be drinking. So if you're going to be there, you should definitely, everybody join the train. We're gonna go out and have some drinks somewhere. So
It's gonna be good.
yeah, it's gonna be a good time.
Ripping. All right. Well, my camera went out as well. It's super hot here in San Diego, so it's just shutting my stuff down. And I think I've taken up enough of your time and gotten kind of I think, really cool perspective on how to think about this stuff. So, Sean, thanks a ton for coming on. Thanks for making the time. I know it's been super busy for you, and I really appreciate you carving this out.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Nick, and it was a real pleasure speaking with you, and thanks to everybody that took the time to listen to me. I try to be not so boring, so
That was awesome.
it was good, and
Super
yeah,
useful.
thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you later. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks. Bye bye.